Hey, it's Pastor Dudley Rutherford, Senior Pastor, Shepherd Church. I want to thank you for joining me here on the set of Godly Goosebumps. This is a podcast where we tell stories of where God is working in our lives, sometimes front and center. Sometimes it appears He's nowhere around, and yet He's there. And it's really the story of the sovereignty of God and how God orchestrates everything that happens in our life for His purpose and for His kingdom. And I hope that if you are tuning in today and this is your first time, hit that subscribe button and follow us on Instagram. And make sure you share, because if this story resonates with you, it's probably going to resonate with someone else. And truthfully, even if it doesn't resonate with you, it's going to resonate with someone out there in the world. And you, by sharing, come along and you are part of this ministry, this podcast, where we're trying to help people know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God is real and that He works every day in and out of our lives. And I'm thankful to have in studio on set with us here at Godly Goosebumps, Kate Maupin. Kate, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Good.
And I don't know if everybody knows this, but our church, Shepherd Church in Porter Ranch, California, it's a rather large church. And in that reason I share that is that we have a very large staff. And I don't always get to meet or know all of the staff. There's just too many people. But you are on our staff here.
Yes, sir.
At Shepherd Church, and you're 22. You're
Yes,
just
sir.
a baby. You're just a baby.
Yes, sir.
You just got out of junior high school like that long ago.
Oh, man.
But we wanted to have you come on and kind of tell your story of how God has worked in your life. Again, I'm like the oldest person you know, and you're like one of the youngest people that I know. But I think it's good to hear people of your generation what God is doing and what God has done. And so I want to go all the way back. Where were you born?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois.
Now again, you've not been here that long.
No, sir.
So you're in Chicago, and your parents, were they missionaries then or not?
My dad was getting a master's in intercultural studies to become missionaries. So he was trying to get a good education so he could be a good missionary in Chicago.
Okay, he wanted to be a missionary in Chicago?
Well, he wanted to go to school. He went to Wheaton College,
Okay,
and so he went to Wheaton, and then we became missionaries in Mexico City.
Oh, you went to Mexico City. And so do you know what caused your dad to want to become a missionary? Do you know what that story's all about?
I would say he went on a mission trip when he was at Ozark to, I'm trying to remember where he went. I think he went to Honduras, and he just, I'm not sure if he knew at the time that was his calling, but I think he knew that missions was a big part of his heart, and that's something that was powerful and something he wanted to be a part of. And I think both my parents, they received a calling to become missionaries in Amarillo, Texas, at the same time. They were both in different places when they felt the Holy Spirit tell them that that's what they needed to do. And so they packed up and they moved to Wheaton and to go to school, and then they moved to Mexico City, I think in 2001 maybe.
Okay, and do you know what caused them to go to Mexico City?
I think the Lord told them to.
Okay.
I think they both received, I don't remember what the specific sign was, but it was convincing enough to get him moving.
So he's just a young man, grew up, went to Bible college, and while he was on Bible college, he went on some short-term missionary trip, got out of college, and God started speaking to his heart, as well as with your mom, and then they felt led to go to Mexico City. So, and how old were you when you went to Mexico City?
I was about, I think, 1.
You were 1?
I was 1.
So you speak Spanish?
Oh, just barely. I've got about 10 sentences.
Let's hear a couple of them.
Yo viví en la Ciudad de México por 5 años con mi familia cuando era una niña, pero regresamos a los Estados Unidos cuando yo tenía 6 años.
Wow, let's give it up for Kate.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to say something in Spanish, see if you know what I'm saying. Yo alérgico, gato, gallina.
No idea.
Yo alérgico. Yo.
You, I.
Alérgico.
Are you funny?
Alérgico.
I don't know what that
Alérgico. Alérgico. Allergic.
Allergic. Oh, that's good to know.
To galdo gallina. What's galdo gallina? Yo alérgico, galdo gallina.
Like fish or something?
Chicken broth. No pollo loco.
Oh, good to know. I was like, chicken's pollo,
no
though.
pollo loco.
No pollo. Okay, so you're allergic to chicken.
Okay, you speak really well Spanish.
Thank you.
I think you know
Más
more.
o-
I think you
más
know
o
more
menos.
than 10 sentences.
Well, I almost failed Spanish in high school.
Well,
I don't know how that happened.
I'm not doubting that that's true. I'm just saying you speak. That's pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you.
You sound like a local. So you're in Mexico, age one. What do you remember about that time in your
Oh
life?
man, it was one of my favorite seasons of my whole life. I remember the food was always good. Never experienced bad food. I remember just the people were super warm. I remember really good music, and I just remember, and I know I didn't realize a lot of kids didn't get to grow up with this, but just the profound like peace that I grew up with. I always trusted my parents. I trusted our team. And I think just because I was around such like profound trust in the Lord that I wasn't ever surprised when something like amazing happened. I was like, yeah, that's normal. That's just what he does.
And what were your parents doing there as far as missionary work? What kind of work were they doing?
They were youth pastors, but I think what they were specifically trying to do is helping to teach churches how to create their own youth ministry, so they were actually able to do it like within their own culture. So there's a lot of processes and wisdom behind that system. I'm not really aware of what it was.
And I know this is irrelevant, but do they speak Spanish fluently?
My dad does. My she's really good. She's not as fluent as my dad, but he's fluent.
Well, you throw that yo alérgico caldo gallina line
Okay,
at him and
I
just see
will.
if he knows what he's
Just-
talking about.
Absolutely. I'm on it.
So tell me what happens in Mexico and what happens next after all that.
Well, we're there about 5 years, and it was amazing. We got to meet just incredible people, work with just wonderful churches. And I think my dad had a dream that he was called to move to Lincoln, Illinois, which is the polar opposite in culture, to become a missions professor at Lincoln Christian University.
Wow.
And so they would tell us, they're like, yeah, there's this thing called fall where like the trees change colors and it's going to be great. And so, I was heartbroken to leave, but I was excited. I was 6. I didn't know that moving was hard.
Your life is a fourth over.
Yeah.
You're age 6.
I know.
It's a fourth of your life.
Done.
It's amazing.
And so we moved to Lincoln, and we moved in the middle of January.
You know what
so
we
it's
call
freezing.
Lincoln? You know what we call Lincoln at Ozark?
I can imagine.
What do we call it?
Not as good as
Stinking
Ozark.
Lincoln.
Yep. Well, when I first got there, I felt the same
So
way.
I do want to say I've been there. I've been to that college, been to that town, and there's nothing
There's
there.
nothing. There's cornfields. There's corn.
There is nothing there. It is, I'm trying to, for someone who's never been to Lincoln, Illinois, stinking Lincoln, it is a dot in the middle of the road.
Yep.
Okay, so you go there, you're age 6, your life's a fourth over now. What happens next?
Well, I get completely thrown off because I have no idea how to interact with people now. Because in Mexico, I had it. I was like, I know all the manners you're supposed to have. I know how people are going to react to these manners. And then when I got to Illinois, I was like, no one's doing what they're supposed to do. What's happening? And so we just had to relearn, had to go through culture shock, all that mess. But it ended up being like one of the sweetest places to live. Like some of my best friends, like closest friends to this day are in Lincoln right now.
Okay, and how long were you there?
We were there about 7 years.
Oh, so now your life's half over.
Yep, now it's done.
Now you're 13.
Yep, 13 now.
Your life is
Oh,
that
man.
went by pretty fast.
Yep.
So what have you done the second half?
The second half. Second half, we went to Dallas, Texas.
Then you went to Dallas.
We went to Dallas.
Are
when
you
I
a
was
Cowboys
13.
fan?
Well, they're my number 2 team. I do love the Cowboys.
There's nothing on this wall that has to do with Dallas Cowboys.
know,
'cause
I know.
They're as bad as stinking Lincoln.
Man, they're not great, but I love them.
Okay, so
But I love 'em.
he goes from being a professor to Bible college, and then he goes to Dallas. How did that move come about?
He got a job at Compass Christian Church as the missions pastor.
Oh,
So
I see how this all fits, because the pastor of Compass Church used to be our youth minister here at Shepherd years ago. One of the few staff people I've ever had. We've had a lot. And usually when a staff person says, I'm leaving, I usually say, don't let that door hit you on the way out of town.
Good to know.
Because if you don't want to be here, you don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And why would anybody ever want to leave here? That's my attitude. This is the greatest place. But this is my attitude, right?
It's a
but
good
Drew
attitude.
Sherman was our youth pastor, and I'll never forget, he was here during the Northridge earthquake. And when the Northridge earthquake happened, I mean, it was devastating.
Yeah.
And I remember getting in my car, this is like 5 o'clock in the morning, sun hadn't come up yet, driving around checking on people who lived in the area. I went by Drew's house. He had just moved out here from Indiana.
Oh, wow.
And a house right over here on Reseda, about 3 or 4 houses up off of Rinaldi. And I walk inside, and he and his wife are literally huddled underneath the table with their kids. They're scared out of their mind. They just moved here and a big earthquake happened.
Yeah.
And they had candles lit.
Oh, no.
And rule number 1 in an earthquake in the dark, you don't light candles because there could be a gas.
Yeah.
And I go, Drew, what are you doing? You're going to blow the whole neighborhood up. But anyway, when Drew left, I said to him, Drew, you can come back anytime you want. We loved him so much, and he and Michelle did such a good job. And even still today, we have our Kids of the Kingdom children's musical. Michelle was a big part of that,
they're
and Drew.
wonderful.
And so he goes to Dallas, Fort Worth area and starts a church, or helps a church that's already there, but it was kind of floundering. And he's been there, and he's just been tearing it up. So your dad ends up going from Bible college to Mexico City. Then he goes to stinking Lincoln, Illinois. And then he goes and he becomes Drew Sherman's missions pastor. What do you remember about that?
Oh,
Your
wow.
life's almost over.
I know. It was, I think, again, it's always when you first move somewhere. It was
How old were you?
weird. I was 13.
13,
when I
yeah,
moved at that point.
you're 2/3 of the way done.
Around that point, so my mom has lupus, and she had a hard time with that in Lincoln. But when I moved to Texas, I had already had some autoimmune issues, like kind of like a year before that, like around when I was 12. So when I was 13 and we moved, there was like the healthcare in Dallas was incredible. Like my doctor I just had like a first visit with her, and she immediately diagnosed what I had, and she like referred me to like, I think 4 different specialists. And so it was incredible. They were on it.
So go into what your sickness was and tell us a little bit about the severity of that.
So I have vasculitis. And so that's an autoimmune disorder that attacks your veins, like your peripheral veins. And then I have a blood clot disorder that attacks essentially your just blood clots really easily. So I have like pretty weakened veins, and then blood that's going to mess that up anyway. And I think we had tried to get
bad combo.
It was bad. And we had tried to get a diagnosis, I think, for about a year in Illinois. And so we had gone to all kinds of different doctors. We'd gone to like Iowa almost, like to just go to all these different specialists just to see if they could figure it out. But they kept like trying to diagnose it, but they would just miss it just barely, but enough that it wouldn't actually fix the problem with what they diagnosed.
Okay.
And so when we went to Texas, they did a biopsy, and then they did a ton of blood work, and they figured it out within probably like the first month we were there. It was amazing.
And so tell us more about that journey and what happened with all that. You're still suffering with all that?
Not right now. I still have autoimmune disorder fatigue, but that's pretty normal. But so I was put on, I had progressed super far in the sickness, so it was pretty bad. So they, I was at risk for stroke, and then risk for a pulmonary embolism, and then if it's left untreated for a long, long time, it can lead to organ failure. And so I was I was just towing the line to almost all 3 of those. And so my doctors, they prescribed corticosteroids, which they work, but they're pretty brutal on just your entire life. And then immunosuppressants and blood thinners, which they're technically they just changed the coagulation of your blood a little bit. So it was, and then other medicines that kind of supported those big 3. But so those were every day, twice a day, and just had to just deal with all the annoying and painful symptoms that came with those. But
Okay, did you take the vaccine, the COVID vaccine?
I had to because my mom and I are both immunocompromised, and so our doctors were like, "Yeah, this is."
But even though I heard it causes some blood clots in some people, you went ahead and did it.
Well, at this point, I had been in technical remission for long enough that my doctor, I asked her about it, and she said, "Well, I think I'm more worried about your immune system than I am about your blood clots."
Okay, that's a tough call there.
Yeah.
And tell me about what happened. How long were you in Dallas?
We were in Dallas. I was there for like 7 years, I think.
7 years. Now how old are you?
I was 21.
You're
when I
21
left.
when you left Dallas. So you're only 22. There's not much left of this story.
I know.
So how did you get from Dallas? Is your dad still there?
Yes, he is.
He's still working for Pastor Drew? Tell him hello for me.
I will.
Tell him his boss is a wild man.
Okay.
And I have stories if he ever wants to blackmail Drew.
Okay. Oh, good to know.
Tell him I've got lots of stories.
Good to know.
If he needs a pay raise, I've got stories that he can finagle there.
Perfect.
So you end up coming to California. Tell us how that happens.
Well, I had been in like technical remission for about, I think, a year. I was I truly believe that I was like healed by the time I was like 18. So
okay,
now,
explain that. Explain that.
When I was around 18, it was probably my second semester of college. I was at Dallas Christian College, and I just started to feel better, like better than I ever had. Like my energy levels were better. My grades like shot up because I was paying attention. Like I just genuinely was like, this is weird. I feel like a not normal amount.
Let's praise Jesus.
Amen.
Come on.
It's true. Come on.
Lift up Jesus. Okay.
Always.
Okay. So you're starting to feel better at college.
So I went to my I think it was my rheumatologist. And
It wasn't the food at Bible college.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No, I love that school, but the food was
It's not the food. Okay.
But they ended up, they did some labs, and they were like, they're all normal, so that's fine. And they said, we'll see you back in 6 months. And usually it was like a 3-month kind of thing, just to make sure we're good.
Okay.
And so they're like, we'll see you back in 6 months. And I was like, okay, cool. And then we went back in 6 months, and all my labs were like completely stabilized at that point.
And you don't know what caused that?
No idea.
Okay.
And I even asked them, I was like, is that just something that happens? And they're like, no. And I was like, oh, okay. And 6 months later, we went back and they said, well, okay, we'll see you in a year. And and all my other doctors were like, okay, we don't really need to see you every 3 months now. We can just schedule out further in advance and just kind of keep an eye on things. And like the longer we did that, the just more normal everything got, and they started just take me off all my meds, and just nothing changed, and just it was such a weird time because that's nothing I would have expected, because I was kind of put in my mind that's like, well, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and
and tell us why you believe deep down that God was the one that healed you.
Well, number one, I talked to my doctors, and they're like, no, that's not normal. That doesn't normally happen for people your age, and if your illness started that early. And then I didn't realize how many people had been praying for me, and I think, I don't know, I was a teenager, like dealing with normal teenage things, but I'm also trying, to survive. And we have friends like all over the world who are like genuine prayer warriors, who are just the people that just walk alongside the Holy Spirit at a level that is uncommon, I'd say. But they pray for me, and they pray for my mom and I. And one of my professors at college, who she was a missionary in the States, and she had taught at like Oxford, and she was this incredible woman. She had been praying for me since the day she met me. And so because I kind of told her a little bit about my health issues and how I was worried that held me back a little bit in ministry and in just normal life. And so she had just started praying for me. And within that time, within like probably 7 months of being in college, I was completely healed. I don't take any medicine. I'm tired all the time, but that's normal. I think that's just normal fatigue. But that's the only symptom I deal with still.
Well, praise God for that story.
Absolutely.
And so, again, my name's Dudley Rutherford here on Godly Goosebumps, and we're talking to Kate Maupin, who is on staff here at church, and we're just trying to learn her story and to see how God is working in her life. And you're from Dallas, and let's go into the story of how you got here to Porter Ranch,
All right.
California.
Well, my parents were Dusty and Amy's youth pastors, in Joplin, Missouri. And
Okay,
so
let's explain who that is.
So Dusty and Amy are Dusty's the young adult pastor here.
Can we trust him?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so Dusty's on staff here.
Dusty's on staff here. Amy is also on staff here. She's incredible. I believe she works with our Next Steps team. She's wonderful.
Okay.
And I think
and how do you know them?
so my parents were their youth pastors up in like Carthage. So my parents, they went to Ozark, they got married, and they were youth pastors out in Carthage.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm tracking with you because I know all these places.
I'm so glad.
But Dusty,
no one else knows.
Dusty's from Carthage, Missouri. I think he grew up there, went to Ozark, and he's been out here forever working as our youth pastor, young adult leader, and currently oversees our Thursday night service here that we have every Thursday night.
Yep, they're amazing.
So your parents knew them.
So my dad baptized Amy, and he married Dusty and Amy.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And so my mom would always tell Dusty, she'd be like, "You'd be a great youth pastor," and she was right. He's wonderful. Yeah. But they ended up, let's see. They would speak at like summer camps out here, and I think that's where I met your daughter Carrie one time because my dad was speaking at a summer camp, and I was in the same dorm as with Carrie, and she was so cool.
Yeah,
she was just the coolest. And
she takes after her dad.
Of course.
Her dad takes after her dad.
Of course. And so I just kind of known Brianne and known Dusty, and so I think I was interning with CIY out at Biola, I believe, when like Brianne texted me. She's like, would you ever be interested in doing like an internship out here? And I was like, I would be anything at Shepherd. That's a great church. I love you guys. And so we just decided we'd just keep going with the process until the Lord shut the door. And I honestly assumed he would. And I was like, it's fine. I'll interview, we'll see. And he won't actually make me move. And he totally did. So but we started with a year-long internship, and then that turned into like a permanent position about 6 months ago.
So you're permanently on staff here at Shepherd, and you're having a great time here at the church?
Having a wonderful time.
And what would you tell someone about who's never been to this church? What is this church like? How would you explain this church?
It is one of the most diverse churches I've seen in America, and it's just wonderful. I think the teaching's incredible, the worship's incredible, but really you can just tell on the staff. Like the people on staff are genuinely healthy, happy, joyful people who you can tell walk alongside the Lord.
Who on the staff do you know that I need to talk to that's not doing their job properly?
No,
don't
really.
mention any names.
I was going to say, I don't know anybody.
Don't mention any names. So, Kate, so from this story today, we kind of got to wrap this up here shortly, but you've moved around. You're 22 years old. I don't know if I can remember all this. You were in Chicago. You went to Mexico City. You went to Lincoln, Illinois. You went to back to Dallas, and now you're here in L.A. What have you learned? You've overcome some health challenges. You've moved a lot. What is the most important thing in your life right now, and a word of encouragement for anyone here today who just feels like you're just here, you're there, you're everywhere, you may have some health issues, but knowing that God is still there and He's with you every step and nothing happens by accident. What would you say to someone like that?
I would say just based off of my own life, but also the observation of other people, I think the faithfulness is an integral part of God's character. That's not something that can be taken away by the circumstances of our own lives. And so I think I have three things about what God is in pain. So He is good in our pain. He's present, and then He's moving. And so He's
Say more those one more time.
He is good in our pain.
He's good in our pain.
He's present in our pain.
He's present.
And He's moving in our pain.
And He's moving in our pain.
And so those are my big three. Like when I am in a significant amount of pain, or when I look back on times that were truly painful, I can see all of those characteristics of God be true throughout even through all the different variables of my life. Those are things that have just never changed in my entire life.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I want to read. I have one more question for you, but I think of Romans 8:28 that says that we know in all things that God works for the good of those who love Him, who've been called according to His purpose. And I love that word that when you're suffering, that God is still good. He's still good. Still loves you. Still wouldn't be here without Him. He's present.
Yes,
he never leaves or forsakes us. But He's moving. He's working. And you've got quite the story there in such a brief window of time when you're as old as me looking at you. But I hope and pray that all the days of your life you continue to serve the Lord.
Thank you.
And that this story continues that goes all the way back to your mom and dad. And it's amazing how your life and family has been intertwined in these different ways in our church, but that's the way God is. Just because you work with young people, and there are some young people who watch this, listen to this podcast, what is your encouragement to young people today growing up in the crazy world that we're living in, where for me, I can't imagine being a young person in a public school in our country, let alone in the state of California, where it just seems like it's a riptide. Everything is bent on, in my opinion, destroying and leading children astray. And Satan is alive and well. You know,
Right.
he's having a heyday right now. We know that ultimately the Lord wins. But what is you work in the youth department in California? What is your hope? What is your prayer? What is your calling for these young people in this world of ours today?
Well, I think just observing the profound sense of hopelessness has just been heartbreaking. So I think the biggest thing I want someone young to know is that there is hope in your life, and that this, like, middle school and high school, that's not the end. That's not the end of who you are. That's not the end of, like, the possibilities of life. And number one, go to church, because you're going to be around people who are wise and people who love the Lord and love you. And so I think it matters who you surround yourself with, but also just know that there is hope in life.
All right, well, there you have it. I want to thank you for coming and hanging out with us today. You're 22 years young years. I can see where God has His hand upon your life, and He's brought you out here for a purpose. And one of the greatest things that I look for in a young person who works on our staff is what I want my kids and my grandkids to hang out with you. And I got 3 grandsons, and I would love for them just to hang out with you. I wouldn't worry about them. I know you'd be leading them down the pathway of righteousness. And so thank you for your life and for your story here today, and I hope it's a blessing to someone. I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Godly Goosebumps. It's kind of a testimony of Kate's life, and as God is working in her life, I know that God can work in your life. So tune in to the next episode. Stay with us, and thank you for being with us here today. Hit that subscribe and hit that share button, and let's continue to lift up Jesus, even though this is Godly Goosebumps. God bless you, and thank you.